And we are outside today for our critical thinking classroom. And we are not only outside today, we are outside today with little Lucy right here. Oh, don't go away. Oh, yeah, little Lucy. Little Lucy to say, come outside and sit with me. You want to give me a kiss? See? She'll give me a kiss. Come and sit by Mama. Come and sit by Mama. Then I don't have to worry about her where she's going if she sits right next to me. But she's pretty independent, too. She sometimes just puts her nose up in the air at me. But then she'll give me a kiss. She has been my little saving grace, right? Okay, so let's get started. We're outside. Look at how beautiful Michigan is. Does it not make you want to be here? I get that other places have sunshine and they have green grass and they have different types of weather temperatures. There's Lucy. But honestly, that's Michigan. That's Michigan. Go, if you never have traveled up the coast of Lake Michigan, I'm on the other side now. Nothing like it. You wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't even, it's barely recognizable compared to this side when you go up Lake Huron. It's barely recognizable. It's so different. It'll be a shame when it's the same, because Lake Huron's all built up. Every piece of coast is built up, and not Lake Michigan. How that happened, I don't know. Cross your fingers it stays that way. Critical thinking people. It's Dr. Annette here in the critical thinking classroom. Looks like I'm looking at my dropped frames, a few dropped frames. I'm not doing too bad on my signal today. Let's get started with finishing what we were talking about. And let me give you the sort of upgrade of what we've been talking about, and then we'll go ahead and get started and get back in it. It's one of my favorite theories of all times. And I might even give you the intro I'm going to give you right now is going to be why it's my favorite theory. And then we'll get into it again. So I'll remind you later on. But I'm going to tell you why it's my favorite, one of my favorite theories. Not my favorite, but it's awfully close to the top there. Just depends on what I'm talking about, whether or not it's my favorite theory or not. It was so not studied. And that was always the downfall for me, sort of, is that it's Freudian theory. It's based on Freudian theory. And it just was, by the time I'm in school and studying, nobody's studying Freudian theory. Well, maybe Michigan was. I'm not sure if Michigan was in their therapy, whatever. But generally, no, they're not. And why? Because it didn't have a lot of evidence. It was not evidence-based. There wasn't a lot of experimental psychology behind, and is not behind, Freudian theory. But then I started teaching personality, and all the books in personality were the same. And the one different one, I'm trying to think of her name right now because I didn't expect to tell you, but it's so important to me. I found just by accident that I'd be picking books, and I was always with my textbooks, very particular about the textbooks that I pick. Very particular about the textbooks that I pick. And I couldn't find a good one in personality. And then I came across this one and I realized that actually most of the great textbooks that I pick with lots of evidence and lots of real meat to it have been written by women and not really the most popular. And I haven't really understood that. And now I do understand it because they were written by women. And that's it. And that's it. And that's it. It's just this dominance, this male-dominated society, it's not that I'm trying to not appreciate the things that you've done, but can you move over a little bit? Your big fat ass is getting in the way of everything. And it is. Yeah. Marin Mandarino, something like that is what her name is. And actually, I am going to get the book because I have to give her credit. And it's a personality book, and she really gave just some spectacular depth to our topic in personality, some real depth to that topic. And I'll tell you why she did, and that's because she took every single theory. Personality psychology is about theories that were developed in the 1930s. We are not a theory-driven science any longer. Psychology. We study and we experiment in these very small areas, but we generally are not an experimental psychology. We talk about the theories that we've had, and that's it. Well, this Marianne Serendino, I think that's Miss Serendino. I'm really close on that last name. She did some digging, cherry picking in the research to find the research that did or didn't support all of these theories. So Freud's not around any longer to say, hey, pay attention. There is research that supports it. Nobody just brought the two together, my theory and the research. Why? Because we don't work that way in psychology anymore. We work in our little labs with our little mice or whatever, or people as mice or whatever we do in psychology. And we don't generalize it nearly like we should. There's a whole bunch of things we're not doing in psychology nearly like we should. Another one of them that we're not doing is we're not replicating. And that means we're redoing a study that's been done. And one of the reasons why we don't do this, and it is important for you to understand science. It's so important for you in critical thinking, this classroom, to understand science. So in college, and I can only speak really for psychology, but I think that this is a general practice, although maybe not anymore. When you go to do your dissertation for your PhD or your thesis for your master's, when you do that, you are not supposed to replicate work. You're not supposed to do work somebody else already did. So what that means is some of those studies, especially some of those studies that I'm talking about in the philosophical classroom, right, and here, Robbers Cave study, Milgram's study, those kinds of things are not being replicated exactly the same way that they were performed the first time. And there is no motivation for a graduate student to do that. What great work for graduate students to do, to replicate studies that have already been done, right? You get all kinds of knowledge from replicating a study, on top of the fact that you end up getting a replication. You find out, did the study really work as planned? And now you've generalized it to a new population. Do you understand what I'm saying about how important that is? And they do not accept replications in graduate school. So there is nothing that sets the standard for I should ever be replicating data at all. And then when I'm in my own career, I should be making a name for myself in my own area. So there's no motivation to replicate studies. So many scientists work just in a vacuum. They just work in a vacuum. And really, these classrooms are about, and my desire has always been to take that scientific information and to give it to everyday people, every age range. It doesn't matter. You could understand it at you could understand it at a second grade level if I could present it to you at a second grade level, right? You could understand it at a fifth grade level. You could understand it at a high school level. You could understand it at an adult level. I try here in the critical thinking classroom to present it to you at a high school level is what I try to do, right? Okay, all right. So these studies here that I'm talking about, these personality characteristics that I'm talking about are from what we would say Freudian theory. It's from Freudian theory. The problem with Freudian theory is that many theorists today and experimental psychologists really do not give that theory any credence, because they don't see that Freud did the experimental work. While the experimental work was done by other people, they just didn't always draw the analogies to Freudian theory or Freudian concepts, or they were drawn, but people didn't pay attention to them, okay? So what is it that has been studied in Freudian theory or not studied, that has been evidenced in Freudian theory or not evidenced? What is the essence of what I'm talking about in Freudian theory that we're somehow ignoring in our experimental world or not getting? What is it? What is it? Why are we avoiding Freudian theory, and what might it have to offer us? I'm going to tell you that, all right? And don't worry about it being like a theory, all right? Don't worry about me saying Freudian theory, psychoanalytic theory. Don't worry about that. What I want you to think about is the basis of the theory, all right? And the basis of the theory is this. This is a high school concept for critical thinking, all right? The basis of Freudian theory, psychoanalytic theory, psychodynamic theory, right? Psychoanalysis is internal drives. What drives me? That's it. All right, that's it. Now you know Freudian theory. Now you know psychoanalytic theory, you know psychodynamic theory. They're all the same. And if you go into psychoanalysis, they're going to look at what drives you. Okay? Now remember, we were talking earlier and I said to you that attachment theory is based in Freudian theory, psychoanalytic theory. It's based in the drives that we have in infancy that translate to personality in adulthood. Okay? So we right now, if you're on board at all, you right now can really see how this becomes critical, right? How it becomes critical that we understand what drives us. Right? If you're in therapy, they want to know what drives you. So some answers to that question might be anger, right? It might be a traumatic experience. It might be fear that drives you. It might be anxiety. It might be procrastination that drives you, right? So we have all of these things that may drive people. Well, then we start saying, where do they come from? Where do those drives come from? We have things that drive people. Where do they come from? Well, Freud says they're so ingrained in us because they came from infancy, childhood, young children, and their relationship with their caregivers. True. That's exactly where our drives come from. They come from infancy, young toddlers, and their relationships with their caregivers, in particular, their mothers. This is true. That's true. So why don't we study then what Freud was talking about? Well, because Freud was weird. Well, Freud was weird because of his childhood experiences and relationship with his caregiver, and in particular, his mother. And that's okay. That's okay, right? I mean, I don't know anything different. There's speculation that the relationship may have been inappropriate. I don't know that. And I do think that it likely, if it was, I don't think it necessarily crossed a boundary, because Freud really knew what he was talking about. He really did. And he really did examine those taboo topics of sexuality in a very stable way. So I don't think that Freud had an inappropriate relationship with his mother. And I also think that that is based on his later questioning of inappropriate relationships that therapists had with their patients. I don't think he would have questioned that if it was understood by him from his past experiences as a natural drive or tendency. I don't get the impression that Freud really understood that kind of drive or tendency early in his career. I feel that he was enlightened by his patients, by his clients. All right? Okay. I think that that's so important. We're avoiding understanding Freudian theory, and we're avoiding understanding Freudian theory because we don't like what he has to say about sexuality, and we should understand it because it seems to me that it came from a stable mind. It seems to me it came from a stable mind. That's good to know. That's good to know. Okay, moving on. So, where were we? We were talking about Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, right? So, Erikson was a student of Freud. And, oh, I forgot. I haven't told you why I like the theory the best. Hold on. I haven't told you why I like the theory the best. Should put up that other title anyway. And that's because of this. I'm going to put that up there. And that's because of this. What I have come to know is that, and this is important for all therapists, I think, out there. I really think that this is so key to understanding your client. So I hope that you listen up. If you're a therapist out there, I hope that you're hearing what I have to say about this, about Erikson's theory, psychosocial stages of development. I've noticed that people can act as an adult. Remember, we've talked about attachment theory, right? Already. That people can act as an adult in these childlike ways, all right? In these immature, childlike ways. Adults can act in these immature, childlike ways, all right? So, an adult can act like a teenager. Let me get over here. An adult can act like a teenager, all right? An adult can act like a child, right? An adult can act like a child. An adult can act like an infant, right? Or a toddler. Let me go to a toddler. An adult can act like a toddler, right? And an adult can act like an infant. Now, I've asked my students this before. I always ask my students in my personality class whenever I go through this. I think it's an important question based on what I just said. So, have you ever seen an adult in a fetal position? Have you ever seen an adult in a fetal position? I have. So now I know that an adult can actually act like an infant. All right, so why do I love this theory? Why am I so attached to this theory? Because I could watch a person's behavior and I can find out where the trauma occurred. I hope if you're a therapist that you just heard what I said. Okay? What I can see from the behavior is that I can tell when the trauma occurred. And so if I can tell when the trauma occurred, now I know what we're working with. I have a good idea. If an adult is in a fetal position, the trauma occurred as an infant. It's a lot of information. If the adult is acting, is taking on risky behaviors, including sexually risky behaviors, right? Risky behaviors, parachuting, taking chances. I know that adult is acting like a teenager. I know when the trauma occurred. I know if the adult punches and kicks and throws things, that's a temper tantrum. If that adult acts that way, that's inappropriate. It's inappropriate. It's not adult behavior. I know when the trauma occurred. Do you see how important this theory is? And then, why haven't we studied it? Because what even more so do I understand? I don't only understand here, the information that's here is not only information on the age of the person, so I get an idea of when the trauma occurred, but also it tells me what they're missing. It tells me exactly what they're missing. It tells me from a large perspective here, a bigger, broader perspective, what they're missing: trust, autonomy, industry, what's the other one? Initiative. I know what they're missing. And isn't that so? Do you see why the behavior can be so important? And you can do this yourself. You can do this yourself. So, and that's what this is all about, right? Thinking through these issues that I've been talking about so you can figure out who you are. So you could do this yourself. You could say, how do I act when the shit hits the fan? How do I act? How do you act when, things are just the worst? What do? You know what you do. What do I do? So we're really going to take a minute to think about this, because even if I have to think about it for a minute, you have to think about it for a minute, because I've thought about this. So what do I do when the worst is the worst? What do I do? Panic. But I don't have panic attacks, so that wouldn't be it. I get desperate. So that's what I feel like is panic for me, right? I'm only telling you this to show you, number one, I'm working through it in my mind. You literally have to take time to think about what your behavior is, and it doesn't come so intuitively. You really got to work at thinking of incidents that you were at your worst, right? When were you at your worst? Because that's usually how we are when the SHIT hits the fan, right? That's usually where we are. We're at our worst. What do you do when you're at your worst? Okay? What's your behavior? Now you've got an age bracket. And now that we have an age bracket, we can see what we're missing here very broadly and more tangibly. Here I can see it. I can see somebody who doesn't trust the world. I can see somebody who doesn't take any initiative. I can see somebody who's not stable. I can see that behavior. So here, these little bricks that we have that go all the way up the ladder there, those are slightly ephemeral, intangibles, but we can understand how these bricks here, relate to real behavior. We can understand it and make sense what a person who doesn't trust the world is going to act like. I could figure that out. I can figure out what a person's going to act like who doesn't take any initiative. I could figure that out. I could figure out that behavior. So now we've got more clues. Who are you at your worst? What age bracket would you put that in? Now we know the brick that you're missing here. But now we're going to get into what is killing my spirit. What's hurting my spirit is what I don't have, which Erickson called a virtue. I'll be calling it like food for the spirit. Fruit for the spirit to me, hope. How do I see you don't have hope? Can I see it? Could you go backwards? Listen to me. I want you to hear this now. I want you to hear this question. Could you go backwards? Could you say, I'm hopeless, therefore I don't have trust? I don't know. Because here's the thing. I think some people feel hopeless a lot, and I think that some people feel hopeless occasionally. Do I ever feel hopeless? Me? No. No. But have I ever thought about giving up? Yes. But I don't, because I haven't been hopeless. So do you understand what I'm saying? I'm only trying to give you an example of my experience, because that's the best example that I can give, right? So what I'm trying to say is have I felt like there might be no hope? Yes. Have I ever felt hopeless, like really truly hopeless? No, I haven't. So maybe there is, maybe you can see that I do have trust. I have to go get Lucy, because that's going to get a little irritating, isn't it? Hold on. She gets herself into a frenzy. It's like if you don't stop her, she just doesn't know how to stop herself. Come on, honey. Come on. And then as soon as you call her, she'll have a few more barks, and then that's the end of it. And now she's right here, and she's done. But she didn't know how to stop herself. I don't know. That's all I can say. That, and I love her. So, what I'm getting at is there's a virtue there, and the virtue is on the outside. So there's the age, there is the primary relationship that you have at that stage that is critical for you getting over the conflict. The conflict are the bricks. That's where the conflict is. Those are in the bricks there, up the ladder, okay? But what I'm referring to right now is that outside characteristic: hope, choice, morals, competence, loyalty. On the other side now, at ages 12 through 20, loyalty, love, care, and wisdom. Those are the virtues that Erickson was highlighting. How does a person get hope? Remember, you're talking about a theory that was started in the 1930s, right? So you're talking about something where we don't even have the capacity, the instruments, to really be able to do experimental psychology. And we're not even there yet. We have ideas. We're starting with ideas, which eventually became hypotheses for studies that experimental psychologists began to do. So these are ideas, is what they are. They're ideas. And Erickson has the idea that we get hope from somewhere. How does that play into development, this developmental process? All right. Now, critical thinking, I want you to know this, because this is really where you get into, to me, therapy, right? And you can get into really helping individuals if that's what you're into. So, what do I mean by this is a developmental theory? What do I mean by it's a developmental theory? I mean that, and it's very specific, I mean that for each stage that we go up that ladder, it's an improvement. Every stage is an improvement over the last stage. And that these stages have to develop in order because they're part of our DNA. And that if we are not successful at any stage, we cannot continue to develop. Now, what does that mean? Again, developmental theory. This is a developmental theory. If we are not successful at any stage, we get stuck at that stage. This is the reason why we can look at a person's behavior, judge it from an age range, that's behavior that you're acting like a 2-year-old, you're acting like a teenager, right? We can judge that age. The reason why we can understand when the trauma happened is because, drum roll please, they haven't matured beyond that stage. That's the reason why we know they're stuck. That's the reason why we know there's a trauma there, because we don't see them move through the rest of the stages in a positive way. And then that means that they are not able to have an identity or have intimacy or have this generativity, which is this ability to pass off my legacy to somebody. It should be maybe legacy versus stagnation, and then integrity, which is wisdom that you have. You are unable to get the rest of those traits if I get stuck with a trauma at any one of these ages. It's a developmental theory because if I get stuck, I stop in my psychosocial, emotional development. Why can I tell you when the trauma happened? Lucy's sniffing right there. Lucy, you stay over here. Why can I tell you when the trauma happened? Because you stopped developing at that point. That's when you stop developing. Okay, there's Lucy barking again. I'm going to go close that door, and then I won't hear her. Then she'll get bored with her barking. Lucy, come on, honey. Come on. All right, I'm going to do what I said and close that door. Eating one of my lettuce leaves that I have from my lettuce plant. See, there she is by the door. Right here. I don't know what happens. Do they regrow? What's on there? I feel lightheaded. Okay. Poor little Lucy's standing there by the door just staring at me. Okay. So, I have lettuce leaves stuck to my teeth now. Which is always attractive. So it's a developmental theory where we do not, or we pause in our development when we have a traumatic event. How can we see that? We see that because you stop in that age bracket and you exhibit behaviors from that age. Okay? Look at this property. I had a lady say to me yesterday, well, why don't you just move if you're not happy with the way that the president of the association is handling things? Really? 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 Can I say it again? Really? Maybe I should just move. Maybe I should just move. Maybe that's what I should do. Can't roll my eyes anymore. Roll your eyes, I'll roll your head. That's from, should I give him credit? Bill Cosby. Roll your eyes, I'll roll your head. That's a shoe through the air. That's Eddie Murphy. All kinds of parenting tricks. So let's take a closer look at these stages now that we understand a little bit more of the background of the stages. The thing I find most interesting about this now, and that I think needs the most a research would be and in a real critical experimental way, really research. And you can't manipulate hope, right? You can't manipulate the trust of a parent who has an infant. You can't manipulate that, which means you're not going to have a truly experimental um, design that uses infant children, right? Because then we're back to all of these things that are unethical that we've been talking about in this classroom, in the spiritual classroom, and in particular in the philosophical classroom, right? It's where you get to the group think, where I'm like, oh, I need this experimental process to work for me, so I'm going to manipulate an infant's trust with their parent. Wah, wah. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. No, we don't. Nevertheless, we do. How about that? How about if we did know that hope was an outcome of our earliest relationships and whether or not we had trust and mistrust from our mothers? Now, we could manipulate that in a very controlled environment, right? Just like we did with the uh, cooperative and uncooperative behaviors with the puppets, if you remember. So that was a while ago, like class 15, right? Episode 15, something like that. So we can figure out how to manipulate those kinds of things in a very controlled environment without ever, really manipulating the real relationship between a child and his or her mother. Can you hear Lucy? I gotta see it because she's really loud and she's getting excited, and then she uses up all her resources, and then she's like, and she has a little hypoglycemic attack. Okay, so nice side view of me. I'm just watching myself on the video. All right, let's move on. So now we've got it. Now we can really move through here. So what is the conflict at ages 0 to 1? It is that we are learning to trust, and we said this on Wednesday. I'm gonna go get her because she's going crazy. Hold on. She gets herself in a tizzy and she just doesn't know how to stop. Now she's over here with me. She's sitting down and relaxing. You just have to tell her to stop. She just, if you're not knowing what I'm talking about my dog. She just starts, and she doesn't know how to stop herself. It's like I had something to say, and you still haven't listened to me or paid attention to me. And until you do, I'm going to keep barking. And she does. Ugh. Okay, let's keep going though, right? All right, so now we know the conflict, trust versus mistrust. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. That's what we're calling the conflict. We see the age ranges there, right? We see the critical relationship that occurs. That is the relationship that determines the outcome of that conflict. So for trust versus mistrust, the relationship that determines the outcome of the conflict is the relationship that the infant has with their mother, okay? When that conflict is resolved in a positive way, an adaptive way, that child has hope for the future. All right? Now, we've done the first one. We've started with the second one, autonomy versus shame and doubt. What are children doing between the ages of 1 and 3 years of age? They are potty training. And if a parent is extremely punitive, if they punish that child a lot, if they're trying to get that child to potty train before that child is really physically ready to be able to hold that. All right, so we talked a little bit about this when we talked a little bit about being anal retentive, right? So children who are shamed during potty training years in particular, we talked about what's happening. They're learning to be good, or they're finding out that their behaviors are bad. So they go to touch something, what happens? You slap their hand. They go to do something, you say no, right? They don't go to the bathroom when they're supposed to, they get a spanking, right? This is the time, 1 to 3 years old, that this is occurring. They are finding out what is good behavior and bad behavior. Developmentally, we say this is across the board. They are learning good and bad behavior. They are learning about rewards and punishments. It's a natural stage. It has been passed down through all of human history that children begin to learn at this age, and then they get corrected, right? And then they end up getting corrected for doing some things wrong. I had to check to see how this plant is doing as far as water goes. I was looking at it in the mirror there. Look at my beautiful flower. Anyway. So here now, if they end up, so autonomy versus shame and doubt. In this stage here, again, I'm learning to be a good girl, or I'm learning that behavior is bad, and are you doing it, parents, both parents, as that is the critical relationship here for stage number 2, are both parents punishing and rewarding in appropriate ways so that the child learns to be curious and independent in their curiosity. Remember what we were saying before. We were in our attachment theory, we talked about a secure base. If a child feels that they have a secure base, there are going to be times where that child explores the world and then gets afraid and needs to come back to a secure base. But that process, hold on. That process is a process of finding your independence. That's autonomy. Autonomy is being independent. Independent, when you're 2, needs to have safeguards, because I don't know what I should do and I don't know what I shouldn't do. So at 2 years of age, independence needs a safeguard. Punishment, right? Punishment. When that occurs, does it occur in a way that I keep my secure base, my base secure? Curious, I'm curious, I explore my world. I come back to a secure base. That also has to do, that reinforces the trust, doesn't it? But I will never do that. I will never leave the base if I haven't established trust already, right? I cannot move on to autonomy if I haven't established trust already. Do you see how autonomy is based on trust? I will never have a secure base from which I feel I can explore the world freely if I don't have trust to begin with. All right? So now we are really clearly beginning to see how one stage, conflict in our stages, is dependent on the previous stage. I cannot have autonomy unless I have trust. But when I do have autonomy, if I'm able to be successful, it is due to both parents who are rewarding and punishing me in appropriate ways, not over the top with their punishments like this, because then that might make me very ashamed of who I naturally am. How do I know this? How do I know you could have shame about who you naturally are? Because potty training is a natural event to learn how to control my bowels, right? And my urine, my urethra. And in order to learn how to control those things, it takes physical maturity. If you try and do that to a child too early, they will not be successful because they cannot hold it. They don't have the muscles or the regulation of my mind and the muscles at the right time to hold it. So if they can't hold it and you punish them, they're going to be ashamed about natural bodily functions. That's so anxiety about all the things that come naturally to me, right? Very interesting too. When you pair this with Freud's psychosexual stages and what might be occurring sexually in a young person, which has nothing to do with or is even close to mature sexuality, nevertheless, they still are maturing in sexual ways. Their organs are developing, they're maturing, right? They are maturing, and they have gametes, which means they have their sex cells, which grow and mature. Doesn't mean they're sexually active, doesn't mean that their thoughts are anything to do with any adult sexual thought. Never natural occurrence for the body. It doesn't mean we get to shit all over the place. It's something we learn to control via our parents who know how to dole out rewards as well as punishments. Three rewards, 3 to 1. 3 rewards for every punishment. If you want a number, if that's the kind of person you are, that you have numbers. Are you getting this? Are you getting it? The virtue, if I am successful at this conflict, autonomy versus shame and doubt, right? If I'm successful, I learn how to make good choices. Do you see what a wonderful theory is? Let's do number 3 there, shall we? So number 3 is initiative versus guilt. Initiative versus guilt. So the best way to understand each of these stages would be to look at the age range. What am I doing between the ages of 3 and 6? And how is it that initiative versus guilt is different than autonomy versus shame and doubt? Well, what am I doing at ages 3 to 6 years of age? What I'm doing is I'm actually tattling more. I'm saying, you can't do that. You're bad. You're bad for doing that, right? I'm going to tell on you. And we're looking for rewards is what we're doing. So this here at this age range is preschool age. And what we're doing is we're finding out what about ourselves is good and what about ourselves not so good, right? So then, do I take initiative and act more like Superman? Initiative. Am I going to be the explorer? Am I going to be the hero? Am I going to be the leader? Am I going to be the doctor? Am I going to get excited about what I'm good at and who I might be in the future? Or have I learned that every single natural desire that I have to assert my personality should embarrass me? You're too loud, right? What a dummy. Who says that? You don't even know how to do what? You can't even read? What? Guilt about who I am. Guilt about who I am. Guilt about who I naturally am. Ages 3 through 6, preschool years is what we're looking at, right? 4, 5, right there. 3, 4, 5 is what we're looking at. And if you are always a bad girl or a bad boy, then I will have all of my morals confused. Where do I get that from? The entire family. We're telling on our brothers and sisters, aren't we? We're tattling. We're comparing our behavior to other kids' behaviors. We're like, that's a bad boy. And we're shocked at that age when somebody does something they're not supposed to do. That boy just said no to his mother in the store. Oh my gosh, that's a bad boy, right? We get our concepts of whether or not we are good or bad children at this age. And that's what I said. It contributes to, what is that out there? The virtue. The virtue is what? It contributes to our feelings of being a moral person. Again, the entire family does that. Okay, I am at 11:35. Look at the rest of those. I could almost go through them pretty quickly. I'm going to do the next one. Industry versus inferiority. What is happening at the ages of 6 through 12? We are going to school. And now what we learned in ages 3 through 6 about what we're good at, we're putting to the test in ages 6 through 12. So we're finding out, are we the nerd? Are we the athlete? Are we the brainiac? Are we the goof off? Are we the class clown? Why? Because we have now all kinds of people that we can compare our behaviors to, and those behaviors are now getting labeled as well, right? Our behaviors are getting labeled. You threw the ball. You're so athletic. You're so smart. So all of those good things that we learned about being a good boy or bad boy, from our moral perspective at 3 through 6, we're now learning about from a talent perspective. If we come out of there feeling industrious as opposed to inferior, we gain the virtue of competence. All right, this is. I knew this was going to be a long one. We're going to talk about defense mechanisms and how they work with Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, but we're going to get to that on Tuesday. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and I'm the teacher. We're here in the classroom. I don't have to yell that. I can be a quiet teacher. Yeah, not on your life. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I'm the teacher. You are here in the classroom. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you here back in an hour for our spiritual classroom, where we are talking about what? Let's see. I forgot. Come back to our spiritual classroom at 12:34. Ooh, from head to heart. From head to heart. What are we talking about? You can know it. You can know those laws. Are they here? That's what we're talking about in our spiritual classroom. I will see you hopefully at 12:30. Adios.